All right, let's get straight into our panel. Opinion writer and West Australia at the West Australian and the Daily Telegraph, Gemma Tonieni, and former Premier of Queensland, Campbell Newman. I got some information, it was out there today, in relation to the AEC and the monies that were paid out by taxpayers to political candidates and political parties. All in all, Campbell Newman, $68 million was paid out, $68 million. But interestingly, Karen Phelps got $80,000 to lose. Zali Steggall got $110,000 to win. Rob Oakeshott got $71,000 to lose. Julia Banks, the loser as well, $36,000. Good money if you can get it.
Yeah, it's not bad at all, Peter. And look, I've for a long time had a real problem with public funding, the way it is set up. I mean, I have a fundamental problem with it, period. I think really the way elections should be funded is anybody who wants to put the money up to support candidates or parties should be able to do so. The issue is about transparency, and the fourth estate, the media get to scrutinise it, and the public get to make up their mind about the politicians concerned. But public funding, yeah, this is the sort of thing we see. What's the end to it? Yeah, every child wins a prize, clearly.
Well, clearly that. I mean, Gemma, if you want to run the next time round, I'll help you with your campaign. You can get a renovation or a new car out of it.
That's it. It's extraordinary. It's one of those things that we see cyclically at times like this when the figures come out. And I have to admit, when I was reading the numbers, I was sort of mildly enraged. You know, this cavalcade of average being paid by the Australian taxpayer to have a crack. When, you know, I completely agree with Campbell. If you want it badly enough, you prove that you can do it, you go out and you fundraise, and that makes you accountable to the people that you fundraise to. These turkeys aren't accountable to the taxpayers. They just took our money, failed at the ballot box and trotted off into insignificance. I'm quite annoyed, quite frankly. I want my money back.
Cavalcade of, what did you say they were? Cavalcade of ordinary.
That's it.
Yeah, well, that brings me into Jackie Tradd. I've got to go there, Campbell. $91 billion of debt in Queensland, and she wants to be re-elected. $91 billion. How on earth does the state pay that back? Because that was the debt left by Labor to John Howard. It took John Howard 10 years at a national level to pay back that sort of debt, $96 billion. You got 91 up in Queensland.
Look, it's an extraordinary sum of money, and the other thing that you haven't mentioned, which is in the media up here in Queensland today, is that the Deputy Premier is using a bit of a pea and thimble trick to take a current surplus in the super scheme for the public servants and use that as a bit of an offset against the debt. It's a bit like, you know, your home mortgage offset accounts, the way the Courier Mail's describing it. I think that's quite apt. And, you know, I'm interested about the deafening silence so far from unions, who I can tell you now, if an LNP government had tried that, if I'd tried that, they'd be screaming and shouting. But, of course, it's Labor. This manoeuvre happens. But at the end of the day, where is Queensland going to be in the future? This is just a huge mountain of debt. It's a big problem for the state's future progress, and the scary thing is it's been propped up in the last few years by probably record commodity prices and coking coal. And remember, the Deputy Premier doesn't like the coal industry, but she's been happy to take the royalties. But the moment there is a real downturn in demand for those raw materials and prices go down, we are in deep, deep doo-doo, and they have no plan to deal with it, which is the worrying thing.
Well, Victoria's not much better because they've had a downgrade on their forecast surplus too, Gemma. And, you know, this is all buried going into Christmas. But these are two Labor states that had good budget positions and have got themselves into trouble. It's yet again the story of Labor and money management.
It's really funny that we should be talking about this tonight, Peter. I was at a function last night and a federal member of parliament said that to me, and not out of any sort of spite or political gamesmanship. It was just the observation that typically Labor financial management is just tax and spend the surplus away, spend it away, spend it away. And if you extrapolate that out, most people's, you know, in sort of everyday life, most people's ambition is to pay off their debt, to live debt-free, pay off their mortgage, not to have the constraints of having to pay back interest. And it does seem completely irresponsible that you've got this government down in Victoria that's splashing money around and eroding a strong financial position, and you sort of can almost see the train wreck happening ahead of time.
And obsessed with culture wars down here. Obsessed with, absolutely obsessed with culture wars. Campbell, I want to bring you in on this announcement today that there'll be a review of the curriculum. Now, when I worked for Tony Abbott, the government was elected in 2013. There was a very, very big national curriculum review led in part by Kevin Donnelly, Dr. Kevin Donnelly, who's a regular on Sky News. That report came in and said we have to get back to basics, we have to have phonics, we have to pay our teachers more, all the things you'd expect. And then it sat on the shelf because Christopher Pyne didn't like the politics of the review. It was a centre-right review. It wasn't left enough for him, so nothing happened. And here we have these results, as we saw in those international rankings, going backwards at a rate of knots. Well, now we've announced yet another review. Now, are we going to keep reviewing to get the same answer? Why can't we just get on and fix it?
I think we've really got to hit the accelerator on this, because that international review and the rankings of our kids is just a shocking piece of news. We've got to get back to basics. We've got to focus on teacher quality. It's not about more money. We've put more money into education over the last 2 or 3 decades, as they have in the United States over 4 or 5 decades. The outcomes don't improve. So teacher quality, focusing on the basics and stripping out from the curriculum all the nonsense, and particularly things like climate change and gender indoctrination. Maybe some focus on maths and spelling will do a lot better for people's future prospects.
All right, we've got to go. Gemma, do you want to chance your arm in the UK election?
I'm sorry, it was a bit faint there, Peter. Can you say that again?
Do you want to chance your arm? Do you want to predict who might be PM in Britain?
I'm very hopeful that the people of Britain are smart enough and decent enough to not to vote for an anti-Semite, a divisive.
Okay, so you're predicting Boris Johnson to win a majority. What do you think, Campbell Newman?
Well, look, I just can't conceive of him not winning, that Boris not winning. So, fingers are crossed. It's going to be bad news for Britain if he doesn't.
Oh, I think it's bad news for the world, absolutely. Thanks very much for your time, Gemma and Campbell Newman.